The Galactic Council towered over humanity in age, size, and influence. The Council, a coalition of the galaxy's oldest species, had ruled for centuries. When humanity finally joined, it was a humbling entry. Earth was barely a few centuries out of its own star system, new to galactic politics. But what humanity lacked in age, they made up for in resilience and resourcefulness. Within a few decades, they'd become known for their fierce dedication to fairness and freedom, earning the admiration of many younger or lesser-powered species within the galaxy. It was that very popularity, however, that made the older council races uneasy. The event that changed everything began innocently enough. On the planet Zyra, a catastrophic famine was threatening millions of lives. Earth's representatives, along with human aid organizations, rallied to send supplies and specialists to stabilize the region. Human ships descended with food, medicine, and personnel, ready to give their all to help a struggling world. But their noble mission never reached its conclusion. In a shockingly coordinated attack, the convoy was struck without warning. Streams of Council-authorized warships cut through the human fleet like knives, each volley finding its mark with merciless precision. Before anyone on Zyra or in the convoy could react, a barrage of missiles erupted in space. Thousands of human lives, along with those of the Zyra volunteers, were snuffed out in minutes. The official message that followed was chillingly matter-of-fact. The Council claimed that humanity's convoy had been transporting biological weapons, a threat to galactic security, they claimed, that needed immediate neutralization. Humanity's diplomats, in disbelief, demanded evidence, only to be met with silence and cold stares. No records, no data, nothing to prove their absurd accusation. The human ambassador to the Council, Elise Lauron, found herself standing alone in the Council's massive chamber. Her protests, backed by her delegation, echoed against the cold, indifferent walls. The other representatives, species humanity had once called allies, averted their eyes or sat silent under the weight of the Council's authority. She could feel the tension, the fear radiating from the other delegates who had watched the massacre and now seemed complicit in their silence. The Council's spokesman, a towering, ancient Caxran with scales the color of bruised metal, spoke without a trace of regret. Humanity, he declared, must understand its place. You overstep your bounds. If you cannot control your own influence, the Council will ensure peace by any means necessary. Ambassador Lawrence's voice trembled with fury, her fists clenched as she stared into the empty, alien eyes of the Council. You call this peace? You slaughter innocents under a lie, and you call it securities? He dismissed her with a flick of his clawed hand. Accept this as a warning, or face consequences worse than your small minds can imagine. That night, a wave of shock rippled across Earth as the massacre made the news. The public demanded answers, but all they received was hollow diplomacy. Grief and rage burned across humanity, uniting them like never before. Every voice cried for justice, for vengeance against those who had betrayed their trust and slaughtered their own. It was a turning point. In a single brutal act, the Council had forged an unbreakable resolve among humanity. And the galaxy would soon see what that meant. The days following the massacre were filled with grief and a burning desire for answers. Diplomatic channels went silent, with the Council refusing to entertain humanity's questions. But Earth's leaders were not about to accept silence as an answer. The president called an emergency meeting with intelligence operatives, ordering them to uncover the truth behind the brutal attack. Deep beneath the surface, humanity's intelligence agency launched a covert operation. With years of experience in cyber warfare, human agents cracked encrypted Council communication networks, searching for anything that might reveal what truly happened. After days of tireless effort, their persistence paid off. What they uncovered was far worse than anyone had imagined. The intelligence team unearthed classified documents revealing that the Council's elite had sanctioned the attack as a calculated move to curb humanity's influence. Humanity's values of equality and cooperation had struck a chord with lesser species across the galaxy, threatening the power dynamics that the Council had maintained for centuries. Rather than risk losing control, They had decided to eliminate the humanitarian convoy, hoping the loss would fracture Earth's unity and force them back into compliance. The intelligence reports made it to Ambassador Elise Lauron first. As she read through the grim details, her hands shook with anger. She had always known the Council was wary of humanity, but this was an outright betrayal. They hadn't just dismissed humanity's concerns, they had deliberately orchestrated the massacre of innocent lives to preserve their dominance. Lauron knew what she had to do. In a secure transmission to Earth, she revealed the truth to humanity's leaders. The evidence spread quickly through encrypted channels, and before long, it was everywhere, leaked to the public in a wave of shock and fury. For the first time, the people saw the Council for what it truly was, a ruthless, self-serving entity that would stop at nothing to retain its power. The outrage was immediate and explosive. Protests erupted across Earth, with people demanding retribution and an end to humanity's participation in the Council. The government responded, pulling their ambassadors from the Council's chambers and issuing a declaration: humanity would no longer sit idly by. But Earth's leaders knew they couldn't act alone. Diplomatic channels were extended to species who had long been under the Council's thumb, those who had seen their own freedoms crushed. These oppressed worlds had watched humanity's rise with hope and admiration. Now, humanity called on them to stand united against the Council. The response was cautious at first, but then messages of solidarity started trickling in. Small pockets of resistance, species who had suffered for centuries under the Council's rule, pledged their support. Humanity's defiance had lit a spark, and it was catching fire. It was then that Ambassador Lauron made a bold decision. She arranged a broadcast that would be transmitted across the galaxy. As she stood before the camera, her face was calm, but her voice carried the weight of every innocent life lost. The Council, she declared, has shown its true face. It does not protect peace. It crushes it. Humanity will no longer bow to tyrants who hide behind false promises. Her words resonated, reaching species far and wide. Some cheered, while others held their breath, fearful of the consequences. The Council dismissed it as empty rhetoric, but a tremor of fear had already taken root. For the first time in centuries, the mighty Council felt the ground beneath them shift. And in that moment, the galaxy knew humanity would not stand alone in this fight. Humanity had waited long enough. Months of diplomatic silence and mounting casualties had fueled a collective fury like never before. The Council's refusal to answer for their crimes only hardened humanity's resolve. It was clear, words would not bring justice. The time for negotiations had ended. In a cold, distant corner of space, humanity's forces gathered. It was an unassuming sector, the Sirian Nebula, a natural barrier of dark matter clouds and magnetic storms. Normally too treacherous for travel, it was also the last place the Council would expect an attack. But the nebula was now humanity's staging ground, their ships moving like silent phantoms through the darkness, weapon systems armed and ready. Admiral Rena Torres, a veteran of countless campaigns, stood on the bridge of the Resolute, humanity's flagship. She studied the holographic map before her, her face illuminated by a soft, blue glow. Around her, officers and crew members worked in determined silence, each one aware of the stakes. This wasn't just a battle, it was the beginning of humanity's retaliation against a galactic power that had murdered innocents without remorse. "Status report," she commanded, her voice calm but unyielding. "Fleet is ready, Admiral," replied her second-in-command, Captain Lin. "We're awaiting your orders." Torres nodded, her gaze never leaving the map. She had spent years studying the Council's military tactics, noting their arrogance and reliance on numbers rather than strategy. She knew they would be expecting a direct assault, something grand and overwhelming. But humanity's approach was different. They would strike with precision, and they would make every blow count. "Begin Phase 1, she ordered. In response, humanity's fleet spread out, disappearing into the nebula's dark clouds. Each ship was prepared for a tactical assault on specific Council targets, their positions chosen to maximize damage and disrupt the Council's reinforcements. The first volley came swiftly, catching the Council fleet off guard. Explosions lit up the nebula as humanity's ships tore through their defenses with surgical strikes. Council forces scrambled to respond, but for every shot they fired, 2 of their ships fell. The humans fought with a ferocity and precision that the Council had never seen. In every blast and maneuver, it was clear that they fought not just for victory, but for vengeance. As the battle raged, more alien vessels emerged from the nebula, humanity's new allies, those who had secretly joined the cause after Ambassador Lawrence's defiant broadcast. They were smaller, their technology less advanced, but they fought with a fury fueled by years of oppression. Together with humanity, they formed an unbreakable line, pushing back the Council fleet. Inside the Resolute, Admiral Torres watched as the enemy lines began to break. The Council's ships, once an impenetrable force, were now retreating, their commanders clearly unprepared for such an organized and relentless assault. She allowed herself a rare moment of satisfaction, knowing that each Council ship destroyed was another message sent to their oppressors. "Send out the broadcast," she ordered. Moments later, a signal went out across the galaxy, carrying footage of the battle. Humanity's voice, raw and unfiltered, reached every corner of known space. To the Galactic Council, the broadcast declared, "This is only the beginning. You have spilled innocent blood, and humanity will not rest until justice is served." Across the stars, worlds oppressed for generations watched, many daring to hope. Humanity had struck the first blow, but the war was far from over. This battle would be remembered as the spark that ignited a fire across the galaxy, a fire the Council could no longer contain. Humanity's fleet gathered on the edge of Council Prime, the heart of the Galactic Council's power. For years, it had been an untouchable fortress, surrounded by defensive barriers and the strongest warships in the galaxy. But humanity had broken through every line the Council had set up, and now, they faced the Council's last defense. Admiral Rena Torres stood on the bridge of the Resolute, the flagship that had led humanity through countless victories since the massacre at Zyra. Around her, crew members worked in tense silence, each of them aware of the gravity of this final assault. They weren't just fighting for Earth now, they were fighting for every species the Council had oppressed, every life it had dismissed as collateral. She opened a channel to her allies, a fleet made up of ships from dozens of planets that had risen in support of humanity's cause. "Today we end this tyranny," she said, her voice steady and unyielding. "We will show the Council that they can no longer rule through fear and violence. Today, we fight for a galaxy free of oppression." A surge of acknowledgments and shouts of encouragement came through from her allies. It was a strange mix of ships and cultures, but they were united under a single purpose: to end the Council's reign. "Launch the infiltration team," Torres commanded. On the edge of Council Prime, cloaked human dropships silently slipped through the defensive lines. Each carried a team of elite operatives tasked with a crucial mission: to disable the Council's command systems and broadcast their crimes across the galaxy. Inside the Council's central command, Ambassador Elise Lauron led the infiltration. Her face was grim as she moved through the corridors, her team at her back. They encountered resistance, but the guards were no match for the determination and training of her operatives. Reaching the central control room, they hacked into the system, transmitting footage and documents detailing the Council's atrocities. The galaxy would see everything: the fabricated lies, the orchestrated massacres, the oppression disguised as peacekeeping. Outside, the Council's defenses began to falter as the broadcast spread. Alien species watching across the galaxy saw the truth, and rebellion ignited. The Council's own fleets started to break ranks, some even turning against their leaders. Realizing that defeat was imminent, Council leaders attempted to flee, only to be captured or forced to surrender. As the Council's stronghold crumbled, humanity and its allies claimed victory. The Council had fallen, its power shattered beyond repair. Ambassador Lawrence's message reached every corner of the galaxy: no longer will anyone rule through fear and silence. The galaxy belongs to its people, and we will defend it together. The battle was over, but humanity's fight for a just galaxy had only begun. They knew the cost of their victory, and they would honor it by rebuilding a galaxy where no species lived in fear again. In the aftermath of the Council's fall, a quiet settled over the galaxy. Once mighty ships now drifted abandoned, and the Council's former headquarters lay in ruins. For centuries, the Galactic Council had been a symbol of order, albeit one enforced with cruelty. Now, that symbol was gone, and a new order was ready to rise. Earth's leaders, along with representatives from newly liberated species, gathered on Zyra, the very planet where humanity's struggle had begun. The planet had since been rebuilt, and today it stood as a testament to resilience and solidarity. Delegates from dozens of worlds assembled in a vast hall, each seat filled by a different species once subjugated by the Council. For the first time in history, they gathered not out of fear, but with a shared hope for freedom. Ambassador Elise Lauron, now a symbol of courage across the galaxy, took her place at the center of the assembly. She looked out at the crowd, seeing faces of every shape and color, many still wary, yet filled with something they hadn't dared to feel before: trust. Today, she began, her voice calm but filled with conviction, we set aside old fears and old chains. For too long, the Council ruled through oppression, silencing any voice that dared to dissent. But humanity has shown, we have all shown, that there is another way. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd, with nods and gestures of support coming from every corner. Beside her, Admiral Torres, still wearing the uniform she had led humanity's fleet in, nodded approvingly. She knew this peace would be as hard-won as the battles they had fought, but she believed in what they were building. Lauron continued, we propose a new alliance, one built on equality, respect, and the shared belief that every species has a right to be heard. This will not be an alliance where power is centralized or enforced by force. It will be a coalition of free worlds, united by choice and a commitment to defend one another. The delegates considered her words carefully. A leader of a smaller, once oppressed race spoke up, his voice wavering but strong. We will join you, Earth, if you promise that no one species will wield unchecked power again. Lauron smiled, her voice steady. We give our word. In that moment, the assembly agreed, each species pledging itself to the coalition in turn. Earth's representatives, once seen as outsiders, now stood as equals among their galactic neighbors. This new alliance, born of shared struggle, was a promise to every world that no species would ever stand alone. As they signed the charter for the Galactic Coalition, humanity's allies cheered. A new dawn had come to the galaxy, one of unity, trust, and the enduring resolve to protect each other. Humanity had not just fought for revenge, they had fought to forge a future where freedom and justice would thrive. Years had passed since the fall of the Galactic Council. The coalition of free worlds, founded on Zyra, had grown into a beacon of hope. It was not a perfect alliance. Disagreements arose, cultures clashed, and diplomacy was often strained. But there was a shared understanding now. Every voice mattered, and each species had a stake in the galaxy's future. Ambassador Elise Lauron, now a respected elder stateswoman, watched the coalition flourish. She had dedicated her life to diplomacy, but there was no denying the toll it had taken. She often thought back to those dark days when humanity had been forced to act against the Council. So much had changed since then, yet she knew that the coalition's survival depended on never forgetting why it had been created. One day, Elise received a message from Admiral Rena Torres, now retired and living on Earth. It was simple, come to Zyra. There's someone you need to meet. Intrigued, Elise boarded a transport ship, curious about what awaited her on the planet where so much had begun. On Zyra, Rena met her at a quiet outpost near the sprawling coalition headquarters. The once barren planet was now home to cities and marketplaces buzzing with life, a symbol of renewal. Rena led her to a small meeting room where a young representative waited, a Zyran native with a firm gaze and poised demeanor. This is Lyra, Rena said. She's one of the new generation, the first raised under the coalition's principles. Lyra extended her hand, her face a blend of youthful determination and reverence. Ambassador Lauron, She began, "I grew up hearing stories of the fight against the Council. You, humanity, gave us a future we never dared to imagine." Elise shook her hand, touched by the gratitude in Lyra's eyes. "It was not just humanity," she replied. "It was all of us, standing together." Lyra nodded, but her face grew serious. "The coalition isn't perfect. Some still remember the Council's rule, and they live in fear that it could happen again. It's why I want to continue your work, to ensure the mistakes of the past are never repeated." Rena and Elise exchanged a glance. Here, in this young leader, they saw the legacy of everything they'd fought for. Lyra represented the coalition's future, a generation raised in freedom, yet determined to protect it with vigilance and wisdom. As Elise and Rena left, watching Lyra go, they knew that their fight had been worth it. They had inspired a new wave of leaders who would carry their ideals forward, who understood the price of freedom and the cost of silence. The galaxy had found its new guardians. The coalition's legacy would live on, led by those who remembered the past but looked boldly to the future. Humanity had given the galaxy a gift, and now, the galaxy was ready to carry it forward on its own.